Lee is a film that sees Academy Award winner Kate Winslet playing the renowned war photographer Lee Miller, whose photographs of World War II helped to enlighten the world to the reality of the atrocities brought on by the Holocaust. This is a film that I was looking forward to from the minute it was announced to be in production. Truth be told, I'm a big Lee Miller fan. I have another YouTube channel dedicated to film photography, and on that channel, I once released a video about Lee Miller. It was a little bit of a video essay mini documentary. Unfortunately, the video had to be taken down due to a copyright strike issued by the Lee Miller estate, something I'm pretty sure I could have fought due to fair use and whatever, but as a low-level YouTuber, I was in no position to be testing those waters. I'm a little bit bitter about it, but it didn't impact my feelings about this film. So I've got some thoughts, and I'm going to dive in. Lee has moments where it truly comes alive, particularly in the latter half as it focuses on Lee Miller's time as an actual war correspondent. The film really feels like it shifts gears a little bit when Miller begins documenting the unimaginable horrors of World War II, from concentration camps to war-ravaged cities. Kate Winslet delivers a strong performance, especially as the emotional toll of her experiences start to show. There is a real rawness to her portrayal. She captures Lee as someone unraveling, not in an overly dramatic way, but with subtlety and the correct amount of weight. The sequences leading up to Lee Miller's very famous photograph of her bathing in Hitler's bathtub stand out as some of the most memorable, although the journey to get there can feel uneven at times, especially in the first 30-ish minutes of the movie. What keeps Lee, the film, from being truly exceptional, for me and a lot of people online, is how it sometimes leans into conventional storytelling beats that feel a bit too safe for the subject matter. That being said, I still find films like this, even when they fall into more quote-unquote middle-of-the-road territory, deeply valuable. And on that note, I want to talk about that in depth, because I kind of hate what I just said there. Talking about World War II films is always tricky, especially when it comes to those films that people might consider, like I said before, middle of the road. These are films that don't necessarily redefine the genre or become cultural touchstones, films like Schindler's List or Saving Private Ryan or The Pianist. They might not have groundbreaking storytelling or visuals, but that doesn't mean that they're any less important in the grand scheme of human history and storytelling. In fact, I'd argue that they play an essential role in keeping these stories alive for every generation. And here's the thing, not every World War II movie, not every war film needs to be a masterpiece. Even films that don't aim for or achieve that kind of status are still contributing something vital to society, because they're part of an ongoing collective process of reckoning with one of the most significant and horrifying events in human history. And because this event touched so many aspects of the world, politics, ethics, technology, human rights, there's no shortage of stories to tell. Every film, no matter how modest, becomes a document of its time. It's a snapshot of how a particular era, a filmmaker, or an audience grapples with the lingering impact of all of those atrocities. These middle-of-the-road movies often do something very human. They don't try to overwhelm with spectacle or epic scope. Instead, they focus on individual stories, smaller moments, and quieter reflections. These are stories of nurses, correspondents, refugees, ordinary soldiers, or even the families that were left behind. And films like these remind us that World War II wasn't just about strategy and battles and political alliances. It was about people. People who were scared, resilient, cruel, kind, and everything in between. And these smaller films often have the space to dig into those nuances in a way that big, sweeping epics sometimes don't. The sheer number of World War II movies might feel overwhelming, but that's because the war itself was overwhelming. It wasn't just one story, it was millions. So I always get this funny feeling when I see people dismissing films about this era as repetitive or unnecessary or cliched. I think they're really missing the point. It's not that we're retelling the same story over and over. It's that every retelling highlights a different facet of this colossal moment in history. And as new filmmakers, writers, and audiences engage with the subject, they bring fresh perspectives and different emotional weights to it. To go back to the movie we're talking about today, Lee, it's not trying to rewrite the rulebook for World War II cinema, but it's still monumental in its own way. Lee Miller's story reminds us that war wasn't just fought with guns and tanks. It was fought with cameras and pens and people risking everything to document the truth. The truth, raw, visceral, and human, is the backbone of why these films continue to matter. What's fascinating is how these films also act as mirrors for the time in which they're made. A World War II film from the 1950s will look very different from one made today. And that's because filmmakers and audiences are always reinterpreting the war through their own contemporary lens. It's why each generation feels compelled to create its own art about the event, to process it in ways that resonate with their present-day understanding of morality, identity, and human conflict. When viewed through that lens, even the most quote-unquote average films about World War II become vital cultural artifacts. Ultimately, I think we need to stop treating middle of the road as a criticism in this context. Instead, it's a reflection of the fact that World War II stories are so vast and so integral to our understanding of humanity that they can't all be revolutionary. And to put a pretty fine point on it, they don't need to be. Every film, every piece of art about the war is another thread in a larger tapestry that helps us remember, reflect, and hopefully learn something. Because the moment we stop telling these stories, no matter how small or average or middle of the road they might seem, is the moment we risk losing sight of what they're actually trying to teach us. That's why I think Lee and films like it matter so much. They're not just about the past. They're about how we continue to wrestle with it and what it means now, today, in this moment. That was a very long rant, and I apologize, or I don't, because it's something that I feel very strongly about. I just want to reel us back to Lee more specifically. The rest of the cast does a wonderful job supporting Kate Winslet. Most notably, we have Andy Samberg playing war photographer Davy Sherman in a very convincing dramatic turn. Although I could tell the film wasn't utilizing him as much as they could have, and I'm wondering if that's due to a lack of confidence in his dramatic acting abilities. But what we do get to see is some pretty convincing stuff. There's a scene near the end where he has a bit of a breakdown, and maybe it's because I'm watching America's little brother grapple with the horrors of World War II, but it was pretty effective. The rest of the cast is great too. Alexander Skarsgård plays Roland Penrose, Lee's husband, and Marion Cotillard plays one of Lee's best friends in Paris and has a really emotionally heartbreaking scene. What makes Lee stand out to me is that it's a film about someone whose story almost got lost to time. Her work was groundbreaking, capturing unfiltered glimpses at the war most people at home never actually saw. But what's even more fascinating is how much of her story we almost didn't know. It wasn't until her son found her photographs in an attic, after she had kept her war experience mostly a secret, that the world began to understand just how important her work was. That, to me, is such a powerful testament to the idea that history isn't always what's written in textbooks. Sometimes it's hiding in someone's attic, waiting to be rediscovered. So I don't want to call this film middle of the road or average. I also don't want to give the impression that it's one of my favorite films of the year. But I do think Lee occupies this important space in cinema. It's the kind of film that doesn't need to be groundbreaking to be significant. It's a thoughtful, well-acted, well-crafted exploration of a moment in history that still feels urgent, particularly when told through the lens of someone as fascinating and underappreciated as Lee Miller. And while it might not reach the heights of the most iconic World War II films, Lee still accomplishes something worthwhile. It offers a unique perspective and serves as a reminder of the importance of revisiting these stories even when they're told in a more conventional way. Sometimes a film doesn't have to be revolutionary to leave a mark. It just has to make you think. And in that regard, Lee absolutely succeeds. But what do you guys think? Have you seen Lee yet? What do you think of Kate Winslet's performance and the way the movie handled Lee Miller's story? And how do you feel about World War II movies in general? Let me know down in the comments. And if you like this video and what I appear to be doing on this channel, it's a pretty new channel, so I'm trying to grow it as much as possible. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified when new videos are released. And with that, go to the movies, and I'll see you all next time.